international and linking, I will ask Jonathan, there's less politics, but more focus on really development issues, I think, and how they are, the debate around those are shaped through an increased access and more linkage between a certain group, those with access in the developing world, and groups using social media in the developed world, and how does that, can that make a difference in terms of how we see development or how we see the world and vice versa?
Thank you very much. Actually, I will talk about that, but I'd like to, well, firstly, welcome you all to ODI. You're very welcome. I'd like to respond maybe to the invitation of James to look a bit of the longer view. I think what's become quite clear from all of these presentations, which have been absolutely fascinating for me because I don't know that much about what you've been saying, is that it's quite possible to overhype the short-term impact of swift changes, especially in the modern world where there's constantly swift changes. But the first thing I'd like to do is to make everyone here who works in communications feel incredibly good about themselves by suggesting that it's communications that is probably, it's certainly one of the most important things in reducing poverty and development in the last, I'm going to say 100 years. Possibly the most important thing of all. I'm then going to kind of apply a little economist's eye to it and talk about price, annoyingly. And then I might just make a couple of comments about something that David Starkey said on Young People's Question Time last week that really annoyed me, which he often does. So the first thing I want to say is that for all the kind of do-gooding that people like me try and do, I think it's important that the development sector admits that it's actually technological advance that is probably responsible for the vast improvements in people's lifestyles, quality of life, in the last 100 years. And especially if you look at health. People, even in the poorest countries in the world, are living vastly longer, don't want to exaggerate, much longer lives and much better lives than they were 100 years ago. There's a very good book, I recommend it, by a guy called Charles Kenny, that's just looked at even the countries since 1960 that have got economically poorer in the last, since 1960, and they include countries like Zambia and Zimbabwe, that there's less money in those countries now, even those have seen vastly improved health statistics. And the answer is quite simple, health has got cheaper. And one of the main reasons for that is that communications plays an important part. Technology transfers quickly and survival does turn out to be quite cheap. Wash your hands with soap. Use a condom. Don't reheat the chicken. Those kind of things save lives. On the political side, which we've heard a lot about today, it's increasingly normal for citizens to have a say in how they're governed. It's increasingly the norm to expect your girls to go to school. That is a lot to do with simply an increased global communication about what human rights are. So that's the first thing. So I think that communication in general, media, has been one of the most important advances or most important things, drivers of change in development for a long time, and that's my long view. In the short term, what's the significant difference about social media? In fact, I'm not sure of the exact definition of social media, but just modern forms of media to maybe even 10, 20, 30 years ago. And the significant difference is price. In other words, people who would not have had the opportunity to communicate about their lives or to learn about other people's lives or to learn about what they should expect from their governments, from their communities or from their own lives or in their own social lives, are able to do so because it's got a lot cheaper. People are able to tweet. All you need is access to a computer. Now, I've worked recently in South America, which is a lot richer than some of the poorest countries in Africa, where huge amounts of people still don't have that access. But most people in Latin America, I'm probably going to get called up on this, but I would say most people in Latin America, where there's a lot of inequality and a lot of poverty, depending on how you define it, most people have access. Almost everyone's got a mobile, you know, and most people have access to some kind of internet access. That makes a big difference. I would like to say also that, you know, these kind of things are instrumental, as I've been saying, in progress and development. They're also just good in themselves. You know, people are able to chat and stay in touch with a lot of people, especially poorer people, have to travel far to make money, to earn money for their family. And this ability to stay in contact must transform people's lives in a way that would not have been the norm before. I don't want to exaggerate it. I think it's been said that all sides, even very bad people, can use social media, and there's certainly a lot of, over where I was in Colombia, there's a lot of hate groups on Facebook and all that kind of thing. And as Bettina said, I think that Facebook is an example of how possibly we're seeing an entrenchment of inequality across the world, whereby the aspiring middle classes in poorer countries aspire to be more like middle classes in richer countries. In other words, compare themselves and their aspirations for themselves and their children with other Facebook users, and not from the majority poor in their own countries. And that might have an impact on the policies that the political classes enact. Nevertheless, overall, this cheapening of access to media means that it's much harder today than it was 100 years ago, if you're powerful, to get away with stuff. And that fundamentally is a really important change. The final point is what David Starkey said about, so I don't know why, but they got talking about social media on this Youth Question Time programme I was watching last week. And David Starkey said he really loves Twitter because it's spreading Western values across the world. And I just thought that is so incredibly wrong. Not that I'm ashamed of Western values, and I'm very proud of Western values. But the point of social media is that it's an ability to, it opens up possibilities to share values across the world. So we don't have to be ashamed of being Western. We certainly don't want to be so annoying. People who want to kind of, you know, it was really assuming that Western values were better than other values, and that's just him, one of the most educated people in my country, supposedly, demonstrating his total ignorance. Which I think that the fact again that Twitter is cheap and that Facebook and these kind of media are much cheaper, let's say, relatively cheap, compared with other forms of media, means that media will no longer be controlled by people such as David Starkey, but is now in the hands of many, many more people, which I think will lead to a balancing, I hope, an educating of people in the West. In general, poor people know more about rich people's lifestyles and values than rich people know about poor people's. I may be wrong about that, but that's my instinct. And I think the fact that media is in general cheaper now and accessible will begin to change that.
All right. Thank you very much.